Hey, I'm Tim. I'm a product designer, and I've been working in the field for over 13 years now with agencies, startups, public sector teams, and in large corporate environments. And I want to talk to you about the 3 techniques that I found to be crucial when working as a solo product designer. So this is when you're working as a solo UX or product designer as part of a larger team, typically in tech companies or startups, and it can be often quite overwhelming unless you have a process or a strategy in place to help you get through and produce the best work you can whilst bringing an impact to the business and, of course, the end users. So stick around to hear all the techniques. The first one we're going to talk about is building relationships. So if you're working as a product or UX designer, you're probably likely going to have a good close working relationship with the engineering team. So these are the developers who are building the product that you are designing. So if not, that's usually a good place to start because you typically have more of a common ground with those teams because you've got shared insights into the product that you're actually building, and you can start to build and foster those relationships on a daily basis. What is important though is to kind of cast the net a bit further and think about how can you start to build advocates for design in different departments. So this can include marketing, sales, customer success teams, operations, just any part of the business where you probably typically wouldn't interact with those people. You know, that's normally a good sign that you should probably reach out and start to build relationships with those teams. So a good place to start that I always find quite useful is to pick out a few key people across those departments with the aim of reaching out to them to set up some kind of initial introduction, one-to-one, some kind of call to get things going. And before I do that, I normally like to do a bit of research into the key person in that team, whether they're kind of senior stakeholder level, even at board level sometimes, depends on the company. But it's usually good to try and do a bit of research to understand, you know, the types of projects they've delivered, how they like to work. If you can figure out the kind of values that they hold, it's all useful information to have and to be equipped before you reach out to the team. So once you have that information, I would suggest the next thing to do is to reach out to them directly and try and set up an initial discussion. Now, it's important to be mindful that you're probably disrupting their workflow in some way because they're going to be super busy with their own objectives and goals. So I wouldn't suggest trying to set up a meeting, you know, for that week. I would probably say try and do something within the next couple of weeks. Suggest some particular times that work for you so that they have some options to work with and you're not asking them to do all the work and figure out the best time for you both. So try to be a little bit proactive with that in that respect and be mindful of their time, which is super important to us all. So if you're able to set up these initial discussions, the way I would suggest to approach it is to not go in there to start talking about what you do, all the great things that product design can achieve, and just basically talking about yourself. I think that's normally not the best, not the most optimal way to approach these kind of discussions. I would say flip that entirely and use that initial discussion to just kind of ask questions and find out more about this individual, their team, their values, their goals, how they align to the larger business goals. Even ask them about kind of their experience with UX or product designers and see if they've got any prior insights that, you know, it might be good talking points for you to move with in the future. You know, if they've had a bad experience working with UX designers, let's say, that could be something that you ask about and figure out if you can try and remedy that with you know, by providing a great experience for the team that you're currently in. So just get the ball rolling, speak to people, and try and figure out like a good cadence and, you know, regularity. You can check in with these various people. That's going to be the key part of building this relationship. And effectively, what you want to be working towards is to give them value back. So you don't want to keep asking them questions, which is, you know, it's good to do that to find more about what they're doing. But there'll come a point where they're not getting any value from these interactions. So you want to start to invite them into the design process in ways that make sense. So this could be something as simple as inviting them, giving them an open invite to a design review or a critique, so they can kind of observe and get an understanding of what you do, but also welcoming them to provide feedback from their perspective as well. So this is normally a good platform to kind of build that relationship at a deeper level, because you're asking them for their feedback on particular areas that they might never have been asked to be involved in. And there could be some crucial parts in your workflow that would really benefit from having a sales representative, someone from marketing, to kind of give their insight on a particular solution. So it's super beneficial for you because you're getting that fresh perspective and maybe finding out something about the business you didn't already know. And it's really good for them because they can kind of give their insight, and you can then go on and potentially action some of their feedback in some way. And if you do that, that's going to make them feel super valued, part of the process, and that's going to just unlock that longer term relationship that's going to be really beneficial for you as you go forward in that kind of solo product designer role. And then you can start to the more you do that across the company that you're working with, the more you build up these kind of advocates and champions for design in places where you never would have thought to have them. So it all helps. It's kind of all that kind of long-term game in terms of you're setting yourself up to getting people on side when you need buy-in or kind of agreement from different parties in the company for a solution. And ultimately, you're just kind of having good conversations in the long term and making yourself known across the company in maybe different ways that you never really thought of before. So really important to build those relationships, which is an ongoing process. The next thing to be mindful of is you want to make sure that you are the voice of the user. Now, this may sound obvious when it comes to UX because you're effectively, that's pretty much part of the role is to advocate for the user, make sure the design solutions that you're proposing are very user-centric in terms of usability and accessibility and how they are actually, how the journeys come together. But just make sure that you're always kind of making others known that that is your goal in many respects. And some of the techniques that I've employed to do this is before any kind of design update or critique or show and tell or review, any capacity where you're sharing design work, is to always kind of give a little bit of a reminder before you go into the design work that these are the people that we're building for. Even as simple as kind of bringing up a couple of user personas that you've got and saying, just a bit of a refresher for the team. These are the behaviors that we're looking to support. These are the types of needs that, X, Y, Z users value, and then kind of segue into the design update. It kind of frames that really nicely. So people are aware of the people are aware of the users that you're designing for. And also you're constantly refreshing people that you always have that top of mind. And it's kind of, it instills that you are kind of the person to go to when you're talking about users from a design perspective. So that's super important. And kind of like thinking about how often you need to have that exposure to users. It obviously depends. And I think when you're a design team of one, your time is even more vital. So you want to make sure you have a regular interaction with users through interviews, usability studies, whatever makes sense. Even once a month, it's going to give you some insight, and it's better than not doing it at all. So make sure you prioritize that so that you can always have up-to-date insights to share with your team based on the design decisions that you're making. The next one we're going to talk about is how to make sound design decisions. So this is kind of thinking about how to justify the decisions that you make. So this is all about kind of being mindful of making intentional choices when you're designing. So I think sometimes there can be a little bit too much kind of visual flair that might enter the work that you produce. I know from experience that sometimes it's quite tempting to add little bits and pieces for the sake of aesthetics. But it's really crucial to always kind of remember that everything that you add to your design needs to serve a purpose, or at least to begin with. So you can always add in kind of the brand identity, kind of those visual elements purely for aesthetics later, and consider if that's important to you as a company and a brand and for the customer. But certainly initially, making sure that every choice you make, every design decision, however small it may be, you can justify why you're doing that. Now, a couple of ways you can do that is to just remind yourself, like, what is the user trying to achieve in this moment in time? So even if you're working on a super small part of a journey, just ask yourself, I put this button here, there's a stepper, there's some kind of form element. Have I designed this in the most optimal way? Like, is there anything getting in the user's way? Am I super clear on what they are trying to do? And just by kind of asking yourself this as you go, it means you've got that justification, ready to go when it comes to presenting design back to the team or stakeholders or whatever capacity it is. You've got that in your mind that you made that decision for a reason. And equally, it's good to be mindful of the business goals as well. So, of course, you want to make sure that any priorities the business the business has in terms of whether they're trying to push a certain product line, whether it's retention is the goal, whatever it may be, whatever KPIs or OKRs you're working towards as a team, make sure that you're considering that as well when you're designing. And it may sound like a lot, but it's kind of one of those things that as you start to do this more often, it shouldn't impact the time it takes to design too much, because you're kind of just in that mindset of always kind of critiquing yourself as you go and making sure that you're not just adding things into a design just for the sake of it. So the more you do that day to day, the more that you're going to be more confident when it comes to presenting those designs back to the team. Now, I know, for myself, certainly in the past, and I'm sure you're able to relate, whenever you're going to present a design in some capacity, particularly when there's like stakeholders and senior members of the team involved, it can be nerve-wracking, right? Because you've been working on something for a while, presenting back to get feedback. You're anticipating the worst, which, for better or for worse, can be a good thing, make you more prepared. But at least if you've justified those decisions a lot earlier on to yourself, and you know exactly why you made those design choices, that's going to alleviate a lot of the stress involved in presenting this back to the team. Because if anyone kind of comments or critiques or asks about a certain part of the design, you've got justification as to why you made that decision. Now, that doesn't mean it's always the right decision, but at least you can show that you've thought about the user needs, the business goals at the point of designing. You can give a response back that is based in some critical and some pragmatic thinking when it comes to those design choices. So always a good idea to make sure that you're thinking about, everything that goes into design really should probably have a justification when you put it in, and nothing should be there by accident. So just remind yourself everything that you're designing there needs to serve a purpose. Okay, so those are 3 techniques that I found really valuable to having an impact across the business and ultimately on the users when working as a solo product designer. I would love to hear about your own experiences as a solo designer. Leave them down in the comments, and I'll catch you next time.